Yellowstone National Park is world famous for its beauty. Every year, thousands of tourists travel to the park to see its geysers, hot springs, and wildlife. But there's more to Yellowstone than meets the eye. Beneath the surface of this beautiful place lies a supervolcano that could destroy everything in just a few short minutes. Could an eruption of Yellowstone cause the world's food supply to collapse? Let's find out. Yellowstone National Park has been famous since the first explorers saw it over 200 years ago. Today, it's one of the most famous parks in the United States and even the world. It covers over 2.2 million acres in the northwest corner of the country. Within this park lie parts of 3 states, Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. This makes it larger than the entire country of Belgium. The park contains everything from rivers and lakes to bison, bears, and wolves. And within the park is a massive supervolcano. If you don't know much about volcanoes, let me catch you up. There are several different classifications for volcanoes based on their size and power. A cinder cone is the smallest type of volcano. These usually aren't very dangerous and rarely have very large eruptions. Next comes the shield volcano. Shield volcanoes are also not very dangerous, but they can be quite large. They tend to have lava that flows very easily, and thus creates wide, gently sloping sides. Mount Kilimanjaro and Hawaii's Mauna Kea are examples of shield volcanoes. Moving up, we get to the stratovolcano. Stratovolcanoes can be very dangerous and often have violent eruptions. They tend to be steep-sided and are made from both lava and ash. Most of the iconic volcanoes like Mount Fuji or Mount St. Helens are stratovolcanoes. Finally, at the top of the pile, we get to the caldera. These are the largest and most powerful volcanoes on Earth. If a caldera erupts, the devastation will be unlike anything else. Yellowstone is what's called a supervolcano. This means that if it were to erupt, the destruction would literally cover the entire world. No matter where you live, you would feel the effects of a Yellowstone eruption. So how likely is this to happen? Well, don't worry too much. Experts say that another major eruption isn't likely to occur for another 17,000 years. However, scientists do believe that something will happen in our lifetime. Experts believe that a smaller eruption will likely occur in the next 600,000 years. In fact, experts say that it's already overdue. There have been 3 major eruptions in the past. The oldest was 2.1 million years ago. The next 2 were fairly close to each other. The first was 1.3 million years ago, and the last was 640,000 years ago. All 3 of these events helped form what we know today as the Yellowstone caldera. Now, it's dormant, but it will almost certainly erupt again. And when it does, the effects will be felt around the world. But what would happen during an eruption? What would happen immediately after the eruption? Well, the immediate vicinity would, of course, be devastated. Everything within 100 miles would be destroyed. Even further away, the damage would begin to decrease, but it would still be significant. The region would enter a nuclear winter. The amount of ash in the air would block sunlight, and the temperature would drop drastically. Plants would die, and so would many animals. Humans would need to find somewhere else to live. For a while, life on Earth, as we knew it, would cease to exist. Now, all of this would be bad enough. But there's more to come. The soil would become completely barren. In the months following the eruption, rain would wash the ash into the ground. This would make the soil completely useless for farming. Crops would fail everywhere on Earth. There would be no food anywhere. With no food, people would begin to starve. This would start off slow, but as time went on, more and more people would die every day. Eventually, there wouldn't be enough food for everyone. There simply wouldn't be enough resources to feed everyone on Earth. This would lead to mass starvation across the planet. But that's not all. The water would become undrinkable. While the water itself wouldn't be poisonous, it would be extremely dirty. The ash would eventually make its way into the water supply. This would kill off most aquatic life and leave the fish dead in the rivers and oceans. The water would also be undrinkable. It might not kill you right away, but it would make you very sick. Eventually, most of the world's water would become contaminated. People who drank the water would become severely ill and likely die. This would be true for both surface water like rivers and groundwater. The water table would become polluted and wells would run dry. This would lead to dehydration across the planet. The world's population would be wiped out. All of this would lead to the extinction of the human race. It might not happen right away, but as time went on, more and more people would die. Eventually, there would be nobody left. We would become the next dinosaur. After humans would go extinct, most other life would also disappear. Only certain bacteria and other tiny organisms would survive. These would slowly begin to rebuild the world. Over millions of years, new plants and animals would evolve and the earth would become green once again. Life would go on as normal. That is, until Yellowstone erupts again. So how severe would the global impact be? How long would it take before the world returned to normal? Unfortunately, it would be very severe, and it would also be very long-lasting. Yellowstone has erupted 3 times in the past, and each time it caused drastic changes to the Earth. 640,000 years ago, the magma chamber emptied in a single day. An estimated 2,500 cubic kilometers of material was ejected. This led to one of the largest climatic disasters in Earth history. Temperatures plummeted by 11 degrees Celsius. Pyroclastic flow spread over 250,000 square kilometers. Hot avalanches occurred along the Snake River plain. Ash fell as far away as Mexico and Canada. And yet, it took 1,000 years before the land began to recover. Crops failed and forests died across the northern hemisphere. Volcanic winter lasted for 5 years. This was by far the worst disaster in the history of North America. After 640,000 years, we're still feeling the effects. The good news is that today we'd be much more prepared. Scientists say that they've been detecting strange activity beneath Yellowstone. They're monitoring the situation closely and are preparing for any eventuality. One scientist said, "It's not a matter of if it erupts, it's a matter of when." This means that we have a warning. We know that something is going to happen soon. But how soon? Nobody really knows. Let's imagine that Yellowstone did erupt. How would we respond? Well, we have a plan in place. It's not foolproof, but it would help lessen the impact. Of course, the areas around the volcano would be evacuated. But after that, things would be touch and go. Ash clouds would spread across the United States. High-altitude winds would carry them across the continent. Most of the U.S. would be covered in ash. This would damage crops and contaminate water supplies. Even worse, the ash would damage electronic equipment. It would bury cars, trains, and airplanes. Power would go out across the nation. Major cities would be plunged into darkness. At the same time, temperatures would plummet. Some places might only experience a few days of cold, but others could face weeks or even months. In the end, only the south of the United States would be somewhat safe. It would still be cold, but it would be nowhere near as bad as the rest of the country. In order to survive, Americans would need to band together. They would need to work together to clear the roads and repair the power grid. They would need to ration food and water. Only then would they have a chance of surviving the disaster. So could Yellowstone cause the world's food supply to collapse? Yes, it very well could. Even though the US would try to prepare, it simply wouldn't be enough. Any country that relied on the US for food would also be impacted. For example, countries that import corn from the US would be out of luck. They would have to find a new supplier or starve. In the end, hardly anyone would be spared. Some say that we're in the midst of an apocalypse. Some say that we're destined to be wiped out by a virus. But few realize the danger posed by Yellowstone. Maybe we should all be stocking up on canned goods and bottled water, just in case. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to learn more about amazing discoveries. Everyone, thanks for watching. See you next time.